Now playing California Triathlon Soup.
Hello, welcome to another edition of California Triathlon Soup. My name is Tom Richmond, and I'm the host of California Triathlon Soup. And today we have with us, calling in from Indiana, Steve Tomboni. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. Hello, Tom. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. I got a chance a couple weeks ago to go to Muncie, Indiana, and meet up with Steve and his lovely wife Tammy at a triathlon, a 70.3 that Steve puts on, and so it was a really good chance to make that trip. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. We're also going to talk about another one of his initiatives called Viking Dash. And just as a background about Steve has been a race director for a very long time, longer than I've been in triathlon, longer than most of us have ever even thought about triathlon. And so we want to gain a little bit of insight from somebody who was providing bibs to Moses.
I don't know about Moses, but
so Steve, do you want to talk about? Why don't we start talking about one of your new creations, which has hit the market and become a phenomena, Viking Dash.
So yes, Viking Dash Trail Run. So let's see here. It's about 6 years old. Kind of started slow with literally a trail run across the street from where I live. And Tom, you've been there. And one side of the lake produces triathlons, and the other side of the lake produces Viking Dash trail runs. So we just kind of came up with a really cool theme. We cheated a little bit because my degree from Ball State University, one of them is in history. And so we have some really amazing finisher medals, swords, axes, Thor's hammer, all kinds of fun stuff. And not only did the theme really catch on, trail runs are super fun. And we can talk about the owner side of this at some point and how Tom's getting involved too. So we can talk about that. But it's the whole theme. I mean, people come in all dressed up. They're bringing shields and war paint and helmets, and they just love that. And then when you throw in these really cool finisher medals, it's taken off like a rocket. We're at 17 races now. Today we're about to add number 18 across the country and probably headed towards 40, 45 next year.
So I when I heard about Viking Dash, I mean, there's a lot of running series out there. There's a lot of runs. It seems like, especially just say in California, there's 10 runs a weekend. So I wasn't convinced at all. And then earlier this winter, I saw a race in Chicago, Indiana, and you have to tell me about that. It was 2 degrees, 4 degrees, really cold, and how many people showed up?
So we're in our second year of Viking Dash Chicago. So this 2018 will be the third year. 2018 will probably land about 1,100, 1,200 athletes over 2 days. Last year it was I'm going to give you it was 20, but it might have been 10 with the wind chill. And Tom, we had 612 athletes registered.
With and it was 10 or 20 degrees, huh?
Yeah, if you ask Tammy and the setup staff, it was 10. And if you ask the athletes, it was minus 10.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's I looked at the pictures and I said, I said those folks are committed, because I think every one of them had a hoodie and gloves and all that good stuff. And for
and war paint and furs, and people are just loving this. Again, the theme is just so much fun, and the anonymity of wearing war paint and having the hoodie on, like you said, and the gloves, and a lot of people really, when it comes down to it, the weather's really not that big a deal. And again, the fun part here is that Viking Dash can be in any weather. I mean, just because it happens to be cool in Chicago doesn't mean it's not going to be amazing in Miami in January. Who cares, right?
Absolutely. Well, so you obviously get an amazing medal. I've never seen a medal like the Thor's hammer. We'll have a link to Thor's hammer on the website. I love medals in terms of making medals and designing them, but that one looks like you could probably thump somebody with it.
You wouldn't want to drop it on your toe, that's for sure.
No, that's a pretty significant medal. What do you know? Obviously, they get the medal after the race. Do some of these cats bring things with them, or is that not allowed?
Well, it's obviously athletes being impaled on their home brought homemade swords and javelins is probably not a good idea. But we are really having fun with this. The athletes are coming all dressed up. You know, some of them are bringing their own weapons, and we kind of tell them they can't do that. But you know, part of what this is, how this has become really interesting is we're north of 30% consistently across the board nationally. People, this is the first trail run or the first race of their entire life. So we talk about life-changing finish lines here all the time. It's our trademarked motto, and really whatever gets people off the couch, we're excited about. And if it happens to be that Thor's hammer medal or the axe or the sword or next year's mace and javelin, who cares, right? I mean, it's getting people up and moving, and they're having a great time. And that's really what it's all about. If the medal happens to work, it works. I mean, that's great.
So you actually have like a coat check-in, but it's just like sword to the left, javelins to the right. Is that
we call it the weapons cache.
fantastic? So next year, I noticed on your calendar. I mean, you're coast to coast here. You've got down in Texas, you've got Fort Worth, you've got Seattle, you've got Shoot International, Toronto, San Francisco, but you have and a lot more. But it looks like next June you have a national championship and where's the national championship?
So
at?
Nationals 2018 was in Muncie, Indiana. It will be in Muncie again. Last year was February. We had 505 athletes registered for the race. This year we moved it to June because we didn't want to tempt the traffic and fate of Muncie, Indiana in February, but next year will be June. And then we are planning on leaving it in Muncie for quite a period of time. It is the home, it's where it started. The trails are phenomenal. But then Worlds, we're working with a couple of different cities to have the World Championships in 2020.
Okay, got it. So there's no announcement yet on where that World Championship would be in 2020. So next year, put on the calendar June 22nd for Muncie.
Yes,
is that
yes.
correct?
And a simple qualifying system. You get, top 1, 2, 3 male, female overall, and typically the 4 distances we typically do. Most of our owners and American Multisport offer the 5K, 10K, 15K half marathon. And then, of course, top 3 in your age group, and you get invited to nationals. And next year's national finisher medal is a golden Thor's hammer.
That might be worth the trip.
It is.
But now, if you don't qualify through that, you can still race. You just aren't on June 22nd. You just wouldn't be in the qualifying
Correct.
for the national championship.
Yes, correct. There'll be a citizens wave and a championship wave for all the races. And again, it's so funny, but you would think of Muncie, Indiana, as a pretty strong multi-sport town, and it's been a multi-sport town for almost 40 years. But I'm not kidding. We've had pros come to the Muncie, Indiana Trail and think it's the best thing they've ever seen in their life. And we cheat a little bit because the horse organization here in Muncie manicures the daylights out of this. And I am not kidding you. It is exactly 6.55 miles out and back from the start to the finish, and it's 20 feet wide, the whole thing.
And the distances, so you have 5K, 10K, 15K, and a half, a 13.1 miler. Where do most of the people
we're right. It's about 45% 5K, and then it's split up amongst the other three. So it's 2020, 15. What's interesting is now that the series of races has grown so significantly, we're seeing an awful lot of people come back. I mean, our repeat rate is pretty high of people starting with the 5K, and then they're coming back to do the 15K and half marathon the next time they do a Viking. So they see the medal, they come, they have a great time, and a lot of beginners are becoming second year people.
Well, one of the things that we noticed, that I noticed, was on your list there weren't any races in
Nabbit, I
Los
don't know how we did
Angeles,
that.
and we had to correct that. So the April 7th of next year, uh, I'm happy to talk about the new race at Viking Dash Los Angeles, April 7th, in beautiful Griffith Park, in the heart of Los Angeles. So I guess we'll be opening that up for registration here in the next couple weeks. And we have a great course that's already been approved. And that course has, for the half marathon, for the 5K and 10K, we don't have a 15K, but for the 5K and 10K, the 5K is relatively flat. Um, and so that's good, certainly for beginners. The 10K has quite a bit of elevation. It actually ends at the top of a hill and then you go back down. And then the 15K is just nasty. We found almost every hill that you could find in Griffith that we've run on for years, and it's over 3,000 feet of elevation.
Yeah, we're
the
excited to be
half
part of
marathon.
that, Tom. I mean, we're so happy to have you as a partner out there, and I pretty much have already put that one on my calendar. That I think my three sons and my wife are going to have to come out there and enjoy that weekend. Griffith Park is such a gem. Very excited to have that on the schedule.
We're excited too, and there's other races there's some really good races actually in Griffith Park, and certainly in that area. We had to work pretty hard to try to find a course that was unique. Viking Dash is new, it's unique, and we wanted to find a course that was really challenging. So I believe if I look at the 17 current races that you have on your calendar, that it may be, at least for the half, the most challenging race relative to, certainly not weather, hopefully, but certainly in terms of
Yeah, that's
elevation
pretty
with
close.
3,000
I
feet
mean,
of
the only
climbing.
course that even comes close is probably Cleveland, and you wouldn't think of Cleveland as very hilly, but
For Cleveland, do you have to jump over like a river that's on fire in order
no,
to, is
no,
that
we don't
part of
do any
the
fire
Viking
other
Dash
than
thing
if
in
it's
Cleveland?
natural. But
Because back in the day, if I remember correctly, didn't they have a river in Cleveland that was
maybe
that
no. This is
literally
further
caught on
south. This
fire?
is in Cuyahoga National Park.
I'm a Ravens fan, so
Yes.
anytime I get to pick on the Browns, I I'll take advantage of it. Well, I really appreciate the you talking to us about Viking Dash, and I'm certainly excited about partnering, having our group partner with you next year, April 7th for Viking Dash LA. Um, what most people also on the call wouldn't, or listen to this podcast wouldn't know, is that Steve has been on all these different boards with USA Triathlon, has hosted at one point 16 to 17 races, and he has a really good sense of the triathlon business as a business. Um, and so I wanted a chance for our listeners to sort of hear that and have a good discussion about about triathlon, especially somebody who knows it from the Midwest. And we don't often have a lot of guests from the Midwest. So, Steve, why don't you tell us about triathlon in the Midwest, and whether it's grassroots or
So
other, and we can
yes,
talk about
thanks,
that.
Tom. And that's kind of where one of my most passionate sports is triathlon. I was a runner as a kid, although strangely enough, I did not run track or cross country, but ran an awful lot to stay in shape, and then just kind of gravitated towards road racing when I was younger, and I actually swam in the summer times, and so my my sport. I did my first triathlon in 1992, although that doesn't mean that I wasn't prepared to do my first race in 1983 and broke my ankle 6 days before my first triathlon in 1983 because I was overtrained like nobody's business. So I've been around a long time. My wife is a triathlete. All my kids, except for the 6-year-old, have done triathlons. And it's actually how I met my wife. So, deep roots in this sport, part of the old Muncie Endurathon crew, and was race director there for Worlds and Nationals. Supposedly, I have the distinction of being the first person to use a chip in the sport of triathlon in 1996 for the Worlds, but there is some debate of that. But I'll still claim it until somebody throws something at me. So, go ahead.
And one of the first, I was at your race earlier this year. You had a 70.3 in Muncie. And a first, at least that I had seen, was you had, I got to shoot off the cannon.
Yeah, we're not talking about the little desktop version. We're talking about the one where they put a ball in and they blow things up.
Yeah, that was pretty remarkable. It's running around in the morning. Oh, by the way, you get to shoot the cannon. That's kind of what we've,
after all these years of doing this, taking care of sponsors, making it an athlete experience they're never going to forget. We do the prayer and national anthem before a race. We almost always have a cannon of some size. We have the small, medium, and large. Tom got to see the medium size one. There is one bigger. But, it's about, in my background as a swimmer, as an aquatics professional, and, I've managed pools for 25 years. It's all about water safety. It's all about, risk management. It's all about closed bike courses as best you can get them. Restricted, I should say, not closed. But after all these years, obviously we've seen a decline in attendance. Yes, in 2014, we owned 16 triathlons, and this year we own 4. So attendance is definitely a concern. The expense for the athletes, the athlete experience. Sure, you've seen the huge rise of OCR, which helps Viking Dash, let's be honest. But did it help the sport of triathlon?
Now,
obstacle course racing, Spartan.
What is OCR, Steve? Tell me what OCR means.
Tough Mudder Warrior Dash. Again.
Okay.
Spartan. Again, for us, whatever gets people off the couch, I'm excited about. So I don't give a darn who you're racing with, as long as you're trying to race, once or twice a month. That's great. But the sport of triathlon has an awful expensive entry point.
So one of the things that, and one of the things from a race director point of view that I saw and noticed when I was at your race was that you have multiple disciplines. So I think you went with your 70.3 mile to start off with, correct? And everybody was out of the water.
Absolutely.
And then you would start the next wave, correct? So that's pretty remarkable to have. You're counting noses that go in the water, and you're counting noses that are coming out of the water.
Well, and
that's
again,
how you're managing the safety
what you saw,
aspect of your
Tom,
race.
is 25 years plus of doing this, and when we are absolutely 100% focused on open water safety. And yes, you have mats, but we also want to make sure that people didn't switch. We've had, the good news is I've seen everything except somebody that passed away. So, we've had athletes not feel very well, take a right-hand turn, get out in the weeds 200 yards, south of the swim exit, and they don't get counted. So, we have some redundancies in that, in making sure that the bikes go where all the bikes are accounted for. And we clear every different distance before we put the next one in. And if that, the shorter course folks don't like that. They all know how we do things. And once they hear that explained, they get it, because, why would we put people in the water when we don't know that everybody else in the first wave has gotten out? And again, I'm the guy that has done, the full Ironman distance with 2,600 people in the water. And I've done races with 1,000 people on the gun and 150 people every 2 minutes. I mean, I've done it all. So other than the ultras, I would never consider doing anything past 140.6. But
And the results, in terms of safety, they show out. I mean, you've been doing this for a pretty long time. You've never had, you knock on wood, a death or an injury like that in the water, correct?
well, and again, I cheated because we have Ball State University here in Muncie, Indiana. We got 40 years of experience. You have Tom Leard, who is considered by many to be the foremost dive expert in the United States. Leard Underwater Service was my swim safety coordinator and consultant for almost 25 years now. And you have Doc Costel here at Ball State University. So when you consult with guys like that, I mean, and they help you design the course that we started using in 1994 and how we did things in terms of where the boats are and where the divers are and where the lifeguards are, and it's all set up. Sure, it's a really big deal. And what if we put maybe 100,000 people in the water in this lake and we've got exactly 100,000 out? That doesn't happen by accident, period.
No, I agree. Well, it was nice to be on that course this year. Relative to, you had 16 triathlons, you said, in 2014, and now you have 4. And obviously, it looks like you're replacing your business with Viking Dash and spending a lot of time on Viking Dash.
Oh yeah.
And from a business owner, I mean, we've had a bunch of folks on our podcast. We've never had somebody who ran, was a race director, ran a business. What do you see in terms of, financial return on something like a triathlon over the years? And correspondingly, you say Viking Dash.
Well, I mean, obviously, from an owner standpoint, it's got to make money. I mean, there's a business side to this, and the ROI for a Viking or for a trail run is sky high compared to the ROI of a triathlon. And again, I mean, what am I, 138 triathlons I produced in all these years? The ROI today is just so much tougher because the swim is more expensive. The run and the safety and the security and all that is so much more expensive. Bike courses are more expensive. In the trail run business, they go into the woods, everybody has a great time. There might be a cross street here or there, and they come back and they have barbecue and beer and they go home.
In Muncie, if I may ask, in Muncie, because as you know, Cal Tri events, we have races in, say, Griffith or LA County or down in Orange County, and the fees can be quite a bit. What's in Muncie? What was for Viking Dash? What's your park fee? What's that fee look like?
$54.
Yeah, so that's that's got to make you happy. Do you write that? Do you save up for that, or do you just do you?
I send my sons out for pop bottles.
Yeah, I mean, to be able to put a event on where you start having those levels of cost, you can see where the ROI is higher.
Well, the other thing about the ROI too is that there's so many other choices out there. I mean, lakes are lakes and bike courses are bike courses, and you're kind of stuck with those. The sport of trail is there's lots of trail choices. And so you can compete on price and I'm assuming at some point if Griffith Park ends up going through the roof, there's other parks you can look at. Same, there's lots of other choices because it's a little easier to find.
Now you're when somebody does to get back to the business of triathlon. So when you're doing a race, say you have your 4 triathlons that you have, what's the average number of athletes you have at those races?
I mean, in the last couple of years, it's kind of, there's a line that's been drawn. The races that we still have are in the 350, 450 range, but the ones that we dropped ended up being in the 100 to 150 range. And so why would you continue to do those? Again, the sport of triathlon is an incredibly labor-intensive You have to be really passionate about these things, these beasts, to do them right. And again, I don't believe in producing a triathlon that is not done right. And whether that's a little more expensive than the average person, fine. But I mean, we're going to have, police officers where they're supposed to be police officers, and we're going to design the courses with safety in mind, and we're going to have aid stations, lots of security personnel and safety personnel in the water. And if that makes it a little more expensive than the average race, sorry. Again, that's just the way American Multisport does things.
Well, you were earlier this year. We had talked about. I mean, you've had involvement with USA Triathlon for quite a few years. Would you? A few
Yeah,
years.
a lot, long time.
Yeah. So give me some examples of what you do with, when you say the state of the sport. What are some of the things that you have done? How much time have you spent on, working with USA Triathlon or on the board of USA Triathlon in regional boards or stuff like that? Tell us what
Well,
you've
I
been doing
mean,
with them.
a long history of doing my best to kind of stay off the board side, but focusing on the race director, quality controls, things like that. Um, I helped originally write the first race director certification when we did their first syllabus for that back in the late 90s with Steve Locke and Mike Highfield and way back then. Um, and most recently, I was on the race director committee. I think I'm probably going to come off of that committee for 2019 because Viking Dash is just too busy. But we had an awful lot of discussions about, quality controls and certification of race directors and risk management. And, the symposium that was produced last year, our committee had an awful lot to do with that, moving back to Colorado Springs. And but again, now that, Rocky Harris has taken over and he's the new CEO of USA Triathlon and some of the initiatives that they're trying to get done. But I mean, this is a huge beast. It's, the sport of triathlon is what, Tom? 4,000 events, 3,500 events. Uh, you know,
Well, USA Triathlon has, they quote 4,300, 4,400 events. Now, I think that if an event like at a race if there's a sprint, an Olympic, and say a 70.3 mile at a race, I think that's three separate events. I don't think that's like if it's on the same race day and you have five different events, an aquathon, an aqua bike, a duathlon, I think you might have seven or eight events at one
good
event.
question. I'm not sure how they count that.
I think that's
I guess I've never.
I think that's how it works, but maybe I'm wrong. Um, as we've looked at, um, as we've looked at, with Rocky Harris coming on board last year, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out for him to kind of turn around what has for the last few years been a slumping industry. And so whether you're a regular typical race directors, as we're doing our channel checks, or you're Ironman, your business, race over race has been down. We had, I think it was last year, was 5.5% to 9% for Ironman in different, year to date races, which were held the previous year. They were net down finishers. Registrants, I never trust anybody who said, I have 3,000 registrants. And then you actually look at the finishers and it's like there was 1,000. Like you have no insight into how many registrants there are, but the finisher data is normally public. So we normally compile some of that data and present that information to our members. I was encouraged to see that USA Triathlon was focused on beginners. We had Rocky do our very first podcast in season 1. The changes that we recommended and still certainly recommend is that the areas of let's bring more people into the sport, whether that's a first timer, a runner, whether that's a relay, those are the two short distance, like a sprint and a relay. Those are the ways that people are coming into the sport. And what I think there's been a disconnect with USA Triathlon relative to how they price their insurance model. And so, as an example, for Trick or Try or Newport Dunes, that's a $50 for us. We launch at $50. And if you're a beginner, it's, $15 for a 1-day license. That might be a 1 hour, 1.5 hour day. If you do a $75 relay at Newport Dunes or Trick or Try, because each of those 3 people, if they're beginners, they're going to have to pay 15, 15, and 15 or $45. So you've got a beginner who's paying $50 and it's a $15 USAT fee, which is 30% added to the bill. Or in the case of that $75 relay, that's a 60% upcharge added to the bill. They would pay the same, that sprint athlete would pay the same $15 that an athlete doing a 140.6 would pay. So it seems to be that could
Yeah, I would
be
agree with
more
that.
of a
I mean,
variable fee.
I would like to see something like
that would be
happen.
recommended.
I mean, again, if we're wanting to bring people into the sport, I mean, you gotta help them out a little bit. I mean, I used to coach. I mean, I coached for almost 15 years, and I'd heard that from a lot of people is that, gosh, you start adding up, a bike, the helmet, the shoes, all the crazy, swim stuff, and you actually need hand paddles, and swimmies, and all of a sudden you look down, and then the races are a little more expensive, and then all of a sudden it just makes it cost prohibitive, or even for the beginner. So helping them out as best we can to get them started, and I think what CalTri does is great with all the gear loans and chances to check out stuff, and all the coach things you guys do. Now we used to do the same thing. We don't do it as much anymore. We don't do open water swims and coaches clinics and that sort of thing.
Well, it's one of those things where it spells, especially like for a relay where you have a $75 fee, but when you add the $45 in 1 day, you're now talking, gosh, I'm gonna do bad math here, 120, and that's a 60% upcharge. And so when you have runners who come into the sport and they're doing a $25, $30, whatever that is, 5K, and you say, yeah, but you need to pay the $15 license, and they say, well, I don't have to do that when I go do my local 5K, which is insured by USA Track and Field. They balk at it. As a race director, I see it, every week, every day. And so I think those are the challenges that the mission of bringing more people into the sport, which I believe, USA Triathlon, that's one of their mission. And then the actual operational, the words and the actions sort of have to line up. And that's going to be one of his challenges, or else you're probably going to see, years more of decline because, we're our sport's triathlon's getting getting older, and there's less people coming into it. So we have to get, I think it'll be interesting to see if they get that support and they provide you that support, whether you can go back from, 16 triathlons to 4 triathlons, because we've had, this will be our 4th year of Trick or Try, and, they provide insurance for us. USA Triathlons provides insurance, but other than that, there's not much promotional support that we get for sure.
Well,
So
I mean,
we'll see where
it's definitely time to have those kind of conversations.
Yeah, it's so it's one of those things where if I talk to another race director or a race director, it's like, if you get additional support, groovy, but don't expect it. So a couple other things to cover before we certainly wrap. We like to make the show 2 parts triathlon and endurance and 1 part fun and all that good stuff. Now I had a chance to be in Muncie, Indiana. And I actually drove from Virginia to Muncie. And
Don't tell people that very often. We should probably not include that in this
That's
podcast.
true. Now some things about Muncie is they have obviously Ball State's there, and we were touring around Ball State, and Dave Letterman was there. Did Dave Letterman go to Ball State?
He did.
Okay, so I saw some signs about Dave Letterman. If your grandma was a canned vegetables or fruits or things like that, I guess that's where the name ball comes
Yes, it
from.
sure is.
The jars.
Yep. The Ball Canning Jar Company was its second home, but from I guess, 1910, 1920 to 1996, ball jars were made in Muncie, Indiana.
And Muncie, Indiana is that area pretty conservative. Indiana, pretty conservative area. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're wearing a California triathlon kit and you're riding your bike somewhere there, I mean, do you have anything to worry about?
No. We don't. We only throw people out on Tuesdays if they're from
Well, we certainly enjoyed the trip up there, and I had, beautiful day, well done. The following month, like I guess last month, was I was going to be at Door County in Wisconsin with Sean Ryan, and unfortunately, there were some complications where we couldn't go there. But I love going to grassroots races all over the country because you see races that are produced at a very high level, because that's all that that race directing team
Yep,
does
that's right.
is produce those
Well, and
races,
that's
and they
the
can
same
put.
thing with Viking dashes. That's what we want. We want guys like you that's what we're choosing as race owners that are grassroots, bottom up, um, that know their market and have been in this business for a while and are professionals, and that just totally fits what we want our Viking dash to be.
Well, the other thing that like I don't think any of actually I know that none of the athletes that have done any of the events that we've put on would know this, but every year we've bought race insurance. So we have race insurance that we buy from Lloyd's of London through a broker. And if the event was canceled due to fire or floods or the plague, I don't know if plague is
I
covered
think
in
might not be. I
the
don't think
underwriting,
locusts can be insured.
but we're insured so that we can get that money back to the the registrants, because a lot of the folks that we race with and that we know, I mean, I'm a racer, I'm an athlete, I don't want to not have a race that day and then tell everybody I'm really sorry, but I spent all your money on all the things you spend your money on, and you don't get a race out of it, and I don't want that. So we insure every one of our races so that if that happens, people can get their money back,
That's awesome.
and that would be a trend that I would love to see. I'd love to see that trend increase over the country.
Yeah, that's interesting. We'll have to definitely talk about that.
So, well, that's it for me today. Do you have anything else that you want to share about racing, Viking Dash? Yeah, three cute boys that you have.
No, I mean, I suppose I usually try to end my pre-race speeches with where this sport came from. I mean, most people don't realize that, almost all the original race organizations were built by volunteers. I mean, I was just asked that in an interview yesterday about, how the hell I got started. Well, I got started in Muncie, Indiana, because that's literally what all the endurance athletes did in this town was we volunteered. I mean, it was a total grassroots bottom. The whole town showed up and produced the race, and so that is something I want everybody to encourage them to do: is become part of your local race organization. I don't give a shit if it's for profit or not for profit. I mean, I love the volunteer for one, get one that Cal Tri does, and we kind of have seen that and started doing the same thing. But give back. I mean, just to be part of a race organization, and if it's just one weekend and you spend a couple of days, but that's really how this sport was built, is by people volunteering and just come out and be a volunteer to be the finish line director, or like Tom came out. And I don't know what you did, Tom. You were like the I think you were the bodyguard or something on race day. I don't know what you were doing.
I got a chance to be all over the course. I was got to be in
Yeah.
transition. I mean, every time I show up to a race, there's always something to do. And so, I was out at transition or I'd bike out. I got a chance to get out on the run course. So
Yeah.
I went out and ran with a few athletes out to the run. And, I just, I love the being out there with the athletes, but not necessarily having to worry about a time.
Right. But again, that's just so much fun, and that you learn so much about the sport. I mean, I would encourage for years all of my coached athletes before they do their first triathlon to volunteer for their first triathlon. Get out there and see what this thing looks like before you show up. And the experience of crossing the finish line is amazing. And so it not only from watching other people finish, but finishing yourself. We have people come out all the time just to have volunteer for the finish line so they can be there. So that's what I would, probably end this with is give back.
Well, Steve, we appreciate you doing this for the last 30 years, 25 years,
27.
27 years. We appreciate what you do in Indiana, and I've talked to Steve before about this and said, if Steve's not there in Indiana supporting the endurance community for 365 days of the year, maybe other companies that come in for one day of the year won't find much there when they make it. And I've seen that again and again, where if you don't have a good, grassroots organization making the community healthy, you can just find what I would call a triathlon desert. So, Steve, I hope you keep those 4 races out there and hopefully figure out some ways to grow those. And thanks again so much. And we look forward to Viking Dash and Viking Dash LA on April 7th of 2019.
It's going to be awesome.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tom.